Hi, Colin here. Welcome back to the next session of our DevSecOps journey. In the previous session, we went through some slides that define DevOps, had a look at DevSecOps, and why GitHub is so important. In the next series of videos, I'm going to be doing a demo that will include GitHub, Azure DevOps, Azure Pipelines, Azure Boards, and Azure, and some other technologies that we'll see. I want to go a mile wide and an inch deep, so we're not going to go particularly deep into any one particular topic. But I wanted to show you what an end-to-end workflow could look like. Now, because DevOps is cultural and about processes, a lot of these principles, a lot of these techniques will apply across other clouds and other technologies and other languages. This isn't going to be a coding demo, though we will change some code and we will see how code can be tracked and reviewed and how we can ensure quality on code. But you don't have to be a developer to follow along on this demo. I want to cover one slide that shows everything we're going to see in the next series of videos. So we're going to start with planning and tracking. A lot of teams will have some kind of backlog that they want to use in order to track work that the team is busy on. We're going to look at a little bit of development, in specific Git, and how we can do source control with Git. We're then going to see how teams can review the code that has been changed and how we can automate workflows that trigger off events in the code development lifecycle. We're going to see how we can scan and how we can secure our code. We're then going to build, test, and package up that code ready for deployment. We're going to see how we can manage technical debt. We're then going to look at some infrastructure as code and how we can handle secrets. We're then going to provision compute and data so that we can actually host our application. We're going to see how we could canary test so that we can control the risk of exposure to new software. And we're going to show how we can monitor the code that's in production. So those are the general practices and techniques. Let's see which specific technologies we're going to use. And again, remember, this is just one incantation of this workflow. We're of course going to use Azure Boards to plan and track work. I've mentioned using Git source control, but we'll see how GitHub adds some extra functionality on top of just Git. We'll see how we can configure pull requests and configure policies on pull requests. We'll see how Dependabot is going to scan our dependencies and notify us of any vulnerabilities. We'll see how SEML can scan our code for some advanced security checking. We'll see an example of a GitHub workflow. We'll then use Azure Pipelines to build, test, and package the application. We'll hook into SonarQube for managing technical debt. We'll use Terraform to specify our infrastructure as code, and we'll put secrets into a key vault in Azure. For compute and data, we're going to use Azure Web Apps and Azure SQL. We're going to use Traffic Manager and Web App Slots in order to perform canary testing. And we'll use Application Insights for monitoring. It's a lot of ground to cover, so we're going to go pretty quickly, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this demo series. The first thing we're going to look at is the demo website. Now, I've deployed this demo website to an Azure web application. Don't worry about how we got it deployed there or how it's configured. We'll cover that in a later session. You can see this website says there's a 3% discount on all oil and filter products. The scenario we're going to walk through is a hypothesis that business has that if they increase that percentage from 3 to 6%, they'll sell more products in the oil and filters category. Now, just before we go and look at the source code and go to Azure Boards, I wanted to quickly show you that this is a standard e-commerce site. So if I click on lighting, it'll load up lighting products. If I click on wheel and tires, it'll go to products in that category, and so on. You can also see the URL for this site is cd-parts-dev.azurewebsites.net. So this website is deployed in the dev category. I also have a production website, cd-parts-prod, where I have my production site. Again, we'll see more of these environments and how they're separated and how we deploy to them in later demos. Now I'm going to open up Azure Boards. Azure Boards is a component of Azure DevOps. Azure DevOps is Microsoft's platform for DevOps tooling. Boards allows teams to track work items, to get portfolio level views, to do queries and reporting. Right now I'm logged into the board of a team called Tigers. I'm going to add a new item onto the Tigers board for update oil discount to 6%. You can see the card change to a yellow color. That's because this team has configured styling rules on the board that any work item that has the word discount in it is going to change color to this yellow shade. If I click on that card to open it up, you'll see a work item form. I can of course add description, I can add acceptance criteria, and there's a discussion control for having discussions. There's other planning fields like story points, priority, and risk, and I can actually customize the fields that are on this work item. I can actually create whole new work items if I wanted to. I've just remembered that the Tigers team doesn't actually deal with this discount functionality. That should actually be on the Pumas team. So let's open up that work item again. I'm going to assign it to myself so that I can see who's responsible for this work item. And I'm going to change the area path from Tigers to Pumas. And I'll hit save and close. You can see that that work item has disappeared off of the Tigers board. Let's go over to the Pumas board to see the work item and to see what the Pumas board looks like. This board looks a little bit different because the columns have been specified and customized according to the workflow of the Pumas team. However, we can see the update oil discount to 6% work item has now appeared on this board. If we want to, we can create child tasks underneath these story items to track tasks. This will help the team track which work they're doing if they're using tasks to track their work. We can also track initiatives or features that span multiple teams by using mapping. To do mapping, I'm going to go to the backlog, which is just a list of the work items rather than a Kanban board. If I open up that feature, front-end improvements, I can see all the stories that have been linked to this front-end improvements feature. I also get a roll-up column that shows me the progress of that particular feature based on how many items are closed beneath it. Let's go down to the story backlog. And you can see in the second row we have our update oil discount to 6% story. Let's turn on the mapping pane. And this will show us a list of the features or the parent items. To do the association, I can just drag in. We've now associated the update oil discount to 6% with the front-end improvements feature. Going back up to the features level, we'll see that the update oil discount to 6% is now an item underneath of that front-end improvements feature. This allows managers and teams to track work across multiple teams. So now that we've logged a work item and we've been able to plan it a little bit, let's see how that integrates with our source control. I'm going to open up a link to the repo on GitHub. It's github.com/10th magnitude/Parts Unlimited. Parts Unlimited is a fictional company from the book The Phoenix Project by Gene Kim. This repository was a fork from the Microsoft Parts Unlimited repo, which is a reference application. We've already seen the site deployed. It's that e-commerce site we saw earlier. All the code for building, testing, and deploying this application is in this repo. I've also cloned this repository locally. So I'm going to open up a terminal and I'll type in git remote -v to list the remotes. And you can see that I have an SSH URL to the repository on GitHub. I've also synchronized this repository to Azure repos. Whether I'm syncing to Azure repos or GitHub, it's still a Git repo. Let's make sure that I have the latest master code. So I'll do a git pull. And it looks like I'm up to date. I want to create a branch. So I'm going to do git checkout -b to create a branch for this discount work. And I'm actually going to put the work item number in that branch name, just so that I remember which work item it is. The ID is 9970. Now, creating a branch allows me to isolate the development that I'm doing from code that's deployed into production. Now I can open up my favorite editor and edit this code. I'll open up Visual Studio Code so we can edit this project. Now, there's nothing here that's specific to VS Code. We could be doing this in any IDE, even in Notepad++, or even Vim. Now that I have the code open, I know that I can go to this index page. And over here you can see the discount is set right in this HTML page. Now we'll update this code and we'll put the new discount in and we'll save that change. And then I want to change a C# file. This is a CS_HTML file. And I have a reason for changing this, which we'll see later, but I want to change a CS file. So let me go to the global asax.cs, and I'm going to change this hello Boston message here in this console write line to hello DevSecOps. And I'll save that. Now I can add those changes in. Adding discount changes is my commit message. So I'll put something hopefully that's descriptive. And I'm also going to use AB hashtag 9970. Now that's the ID of the Azure Boards item that we're linking these commits to. All right, so those changes have been added to my local repo. I'm going to want to synchronize them up to the GitHub repo. In order to do that, we'll first check the Git status. We're clean, there's nothing to commit, and now we'll do a git push, and that'll ask to set an upstream. So we can do that. And we've pushed those changes up. Now I want you to note this message that we received when we did this push. GitHub is telling us that it found one vulnerability it's given us a link to the alerts page where we can go and view that vulnerability. Let me open up the repo again and just refresh. Now you'll notice that there's no indication here on this page that I have a vulnerability, and that's because I've opened this particular browser in incognito. Let me open it from a browser where I've actually logged in as one of the contributors on that repo. And you can see that right at the top of this repo, I can see the same security alert that I was getting from the push in the console. Let's go and view that security alert just so we can see what it looks like. It seems like there's a vulnerability in Bootstrap. Now we'll come back to this in a later demo. For now, let's go back to the repo, and we can see that we have the discount 9970 branch, and we can now compare and pull request that branch. Now I've only added one commit here, but of course there could be many commits as I'm working on the code. This is not a coding demo, but we have changed the code and we want to do a pull request because we're now ready to have that code merged into master. Let's quickly flip over to the board, and we'll go back to the Kanban board so we can see the card for that item. And you'll notice the little Octocat glyph has appeared on our work item. Now if I click that to expand it, you'll see that GitHub has created an annotation on this card linking this work item to a particular commit in the repo. Clicking on that link will of course open the repo and take me to that particular commit. So let's click compare and pull request so that we can signal to the rest of the team that we want to merge these changes into master. Now in order to automatically transition the work item, I'm also going to add a note in here that says fixes AB hash 9970. So that word fixes tells the integration from GitHub to Azure DevOps to transition that work item. And we'll hit create pull request. Now if you watch this fixes AB hash 9970, you'll see that it's plain text now, but within a couple seconds that'll change into a hyperlink as GitHub and Azure DevOps link the pull request and the work item. Down below you can see a number of checks have queued. We'll see these checks in more detail in a later demo. But we've set up some policies on this repository that require code to be reviewed before it can be merged into master. You can see this rule here stating that a review is required. Where do we find those settings? Well, in the settings of the repository, and we can click on branches, and we'll see a section for branch protection rules. Let's see the rules that we've set up on the master branch. Here we've enabled require pull request reviews before merging, and there are some additional options that we can configure, like how many reviewers we need, whether to dismiss stale pull requests, and so on. We've also required a number of other status checks. Again, we'll cover these in a later demo, but these will ensure that the code we're merging in doesn't break the build, passes unit tests, passes quality gates, and so on. There are a number of options that we can configure in this settings pane. Let's go back to the pull request. You can see the AB#9970 is now a hyperlink, and clicking that will of course open up the Azure DevOps board and take me straight to that work item. Let's go back to the card on the board. And we now see that there's a second glyph that's been added to this card, telling me that there's a pull request for this particular work item. Let's go back to the pull request. Now imagine I was a reviewer and I was reviewing this code. I would be able to see which work item this code relates to. That gives me context immediately. I'm also able to see all of the files that have been changed. Here I can see the change to the global asax.cs file, changing the message. And here I can see the change to the index.cshtml. Have you noticed an error here? Right, the discount wasn't changed to 6, it was changed to 5. So I'll click this plus here to add a new comment here. And of course I can @mention team members. I'm going to @mention myself just because I'm doing this demo solo. And we could perhaps start a review. Now this allows a discussion between the reviewer and the reviewee around the code. This example is a little bit trivial, but you can imagine more complex code, how valuable it is to save not only the review, but the discussion around that review. Let's go and make that update so we can update the code that's in this pull request. So we'll come back to VS Code, go back to the index page, and update this to 6%. We'll commit that in with a good message. And again, we'll push that to the remote. You'll see we're still getting the notification about the vulnerability, which we'll see in more detail in another video. Let's go back to GitHub and click refresh because there's been changes to the code on this branch. That looks better. Now as a reviewer, I can leave a comment here. Looks good to me, and we'll approve. Well, I would approve if I was allowed to approve my own changes, but I'm going to submit this review. Looking at the checks, we can see that there are still some ongoing checks. We'll cover those in the next video.